Don't let anyone bully you out of being who you are. This was a really great conversation with Elizabeth. It's about her story of being neurodivergent, being bullied out of church at a young age, coming out to her parents, and the struggles that came with that. I really hope that you will enjoy this conversation. Please leave a comment and let me know if you watched or listened to it. And let's jump right in.
It hasn't been easy, and it's been very frustrating and very painful, and I have shed a lot of tears and lost a lot of sleep over it. I will say that.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here, for being willing to share your story, and just this whole theme, reclaiming trauma to change the world. It's so powerful and it's so necessary. So thank you for being here.
No problem. Thank you. I'm on the autism spectrum, and for me, I guess you could say one of the benefits of that. I mean, there are lots of things that are not benefits, but one of the things that is a benefit is that I've always had a really inquisitive nature. I always want to know more about whatever subject I'm talking about. And my parents, my dad is a retired Southern Baptist minister, and so I'm a preacher's kid, and and also my mom is a retired middle school English teacher, and so my parents are very educated, and they were very interested in me pursuing education. So along with that comes questions. I'm kind of an inquisitive nature anyway, and I have a tendency towards doubting things that I can't see in front of me. And so I had a lot of questions about, um, my mom read the Bible to me every night until I was about 12. And so whenever we ran across things in the Bible that I wanted to know more about, whether it was the meaning of a word like begat, or something about uh, one of the stories where I was wondering about this or that, and one of those questions at one point was, is Anne Frank going to hell? Which my mom, being an eighth grade English teacher, really loves Anne Frank, and I knew that, and so but her not being Christian, her being Jewish, and of course, like, there was no good answer to that question because my mom didn't want to say, that she's going to hell because, Anne Frank, who's done so much for humanity, with her writing, whether she wanted it to be published or not. And so, yeah, my mom had a really hard time answering that question. And there were I just got more and more questions. And like at church, for example, in the Southern Baptist Church, and I think it's still true, women were not allowed to be really in front of the church for much of anything except singing a song every now and then, or the organist and the pianist were ladies. But for the most part, the only positions in church that women could hold would be Sunday school teaching, or taking care of the children, or cooking at our Wednesday night fellowship thing that we had. And so that struck me. I mean, I was probably 7 when I asked about that, because I didn't obviously know anything about feminism. I think I'd probably heard the term women's lib at the time, which was the more going term at the time. But all I knew was that boys got to do cooler stuff than girls, and that seemed very unfair to me because I was just like, well, I mean, I'm at least as smart as all these boys around me. Like, what makes them extra special? And again, there was no good answer to that question. I mean, they could talk about what Paul said and blah blah blah, but even at the time, I was just like, who was Paul? Like, he wasn't Jesus.
I
And
love
so
that you were questioning so young at 7 that most people wouldn't even think. Like, what you see is what you get. That's what's normal.
well, the thing is, the boys got to go on a camping trip, and I really wanted to go. And also my dad was going to be going on the trip because the preacher would go with the boys auxiliary. I think they were called royal ambassadors or something weird like that. They were the RAs and we were the GAs, and GAs was girls in action. and like the action was like making pot holders. And so yeah, I mean, actually I really enjoy making pot holders now, but at the time I was not interested. Um, and so, I basically wanted to go camping. And so I convinced my dad to let me go. And, I stayed in a tent with him, obviously, and it was fine, but the boys were mad. Um,
Sucks
but
to
I,
be them.
yeah, I know. And so, well, I mean, most of them were my friends anyway. And so it was just weird. But anyway, so I just saw that as unfair. And, I just kept getting more and more questions like that. And then when I was in ninth grade, a friend of mine from school came out as bisexual. And at first I was like really homophobic about that, about the, biphobic wasn't really a word then, but that too. And so, but then I saw other people picking on her and I was just like, well, that regardless of what I think, that's not right. And so I wrote her a letter in which I just said, like, I saw everyone picking on you. I just want you to know that I will always be your friend. And we're still friends, by the way. We're Facebook friends, and when she comes around, we certainly get together. But and like she came to my wedding and stuff. I don't know, it just everything kept stacking up and I kept having more and more questions and I kept, having more and more doubts about everything. And alongside that, my dad was the pastor, and Baptist churches don't have bishops or anything to move pastors around. And so, if somebody decides they have beef with their Southern Baptist pastor, he can either leave by finding a new church or leave by them voting him out. And so, my dad had some people who were, against him about. I don't even remember what it was about, to be honest. I think it was something about divorced deacons or something, and the biblical position being that people who are divorced can't have church leadership. And so obviously there were some people with some money, some business owners in town who didn't really like that, and my dad didn't really like, the church not getting their money, and so you know he just kind of let them kind of do their thing for a long time until eventually they got so much support that it was clear that he was going to get voted out.
Wow.
And just like the people, the parents of, well, like some of these people had kids who were my age, and so the kids started picking on me because they had disagreement with my parents. And then like the choir director started picking on me. And like when you're in third grade and somebody doesn't give you stickers, like everybody gets more stickers, like you're gonna notice.
How did that affect you
I
being
mean, it was
left out
awful.
like that?
I mean, it was terrible. And like I knew it was happening because I was just unfortunately very aware of everything around me all the time,
Mm.
maybe more than most people. And so, when I got picked on, I knew I was being picked on. I could see that I had like two stickers and other people had like 20. And, again, in third grade, like that's a huge deal. And the different types of stickers, like there were puffy ones and like ones with like jiggly eyes. And, I mean, like sticker collecting was kind of my thing at the time. And so it was bad. And then like the kids would pick on me. Like one time some boys threw me in a trash can and like pulled my hat over my head so that I couldn't see. And then um I don't know, another time we were going to some youth convention in Little Rock, which is the Arkansas state capital. So I guess it was like some kind of state youth convention or something. And so I took a friend with me from school, and so we went swimming at the hotel. And then while we were swimming, the kids convinced a housekeeper that it was their room, and then they busted into our room and like trashed it and like squished cupcakes into the floor and like threw all our snacks around that we had brought, and also called us lesies, which at the time I barely even knew what that meant. And so it was really awful. And so I went
How
home.
old were you and these kids at this time?
I think in this case I was like probably 13 or 14. It was a youth thing, so yeah, I was
Enough to
probably in
know
like eighth
better.
grade, whatever age you are in eighth grade.
Yeah, old enough to know better.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. That, I mean, I would hope anybody would know not to trash a hotel room, but yeah, anyway, so they trashed the hotel room, and I told the youth director, and he came and looked at it and was just like, "You can pick this up." And so, I called my parents from there, I guess. I think you could call long distance. And so they were just like, "Yeah, okay, well, we'll deal with it when we get home." And they never really dealt with it. And so the problem was not just that I was being picked on, but just the fact that like my parents did not want to involve themselves in like going against these people in church, because dad was afraid that he would get voted out. And, a couple years later, like 3 years later, he was about to. And I just had this moment on Wednesday night church one night where we came there to go to quote unquote fellowship dinner and stuff. And I just looked around, and all these people, like half of them were people that hated my parents and had been mean to them or me. And so, I just had I call it like a Matrix moment where, how Neo sees everything in code all of a sudden. Sorry for people who haven't seen the Matrix 1999, but, there's this moment where he sees everything in code and he sees what's really going on. And and it's not that I hadn't seen what was going on before, but it just kind of all hit me all at once.
Mm.
And so, I started crying and I couldn't stop. And my mom kind of pulled me off into a Sunday school room or whatever and was like, "What's going on?" Because I guess she could tell that this was not like normal. And so I just said, "I can't be here anymore. I can't be around these people. These people are terrible. They hate us. I've had to deal with these people." Yeah, I was 15 at this point. And so I was like, "I've had to deal with these people for so long and I can't anymore." And I was like, "You're going to take me home and I'm not coming back." And she did, which was the craziest part. Because like, never up to that point had really I had not felt that any consideration had been given for me as far as that stuff goes. And so, but I guess she just, finally, I was 15, I was starting to get older, and she finally took me seriously. And so they did not make me go back. And any subsequent churches that my dad had, he said, I did not have to be part of the package. And so I was like, good, I'm not. Uh, and so, unlike a lot of people who come to deconstruction later in life, like I came to it pretty early, and it wasn't that like I was consciously, giving up Christianity or the church or God or anything like that. But I mean that came later. But I was just like, I can't deal with these people, and being a preacher's daughter in general, like in a small town, and then your mom is a teacher, like you're a public figure, like
Mm.
the equivalent of a public figure. And so it was like anytime I did anything that was out of the ordinary, people would be like, "And you're a preacher's daughter too." And I just got so tired of that, because I was just like, I'm just me, I'm not going to be able to be anything else. So if people are going to be awful about it, then I don't want to be part of it.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the anti-gay rhetoric that you were taught. Do you remember like internalizing it and just, yeah, does that
I,
make sense?
yeah, I don't remember ever internalizing it. I remember asking what gay was, and my mom saying it was something negative and something about men being together. And so, I was just like, okay, well, I guess that's bad.
Bad for
Um,
men.
yeah, and and I knew what the word lesbian meant, but like had never met anyone, never seen anyone on television, and much less like bisexual was barely heard of at the time, and trans was something that was still on the horizon. People went by transsexual. That's was the term at the time. And so, I'm older than I look. But yeah, so I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. But my parents had a book called "How to Talk to Your Kids About Sex" by this Australian evangelist named Drakeford, who wrote a bunch of popular like marriage and family books in the 1970s for evangelical families. And so my parents had this book that I think the title was "How to Talk to Your Kids About Sex," and obviously they had not. And so I borrowed it from my dad's library and read it, and it turns out it was not good information, which I didn't know at the time. It was from a Baptist publisher, obviously by an evangelist, not a doctor or sex educator of any sort. And so it had the information in there that I was looking for, which was what is sex, basically. Um, but it also had all kinds of things in there about masturbation, about, homosexuality, all this stuff. And of course, anything that wasn't like married straight couple sex was portrayed as bad. And so, for instance, I remember distinctly reading the statistic 99% of homosexuals masturbated as young people. And, obviously, like 99% of people do. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, oh no, I might be gay. And like, I didn't have any inclination at the time about anything, but like I read this information and I was like, oh crap, okay, well, and I guess okay. So that was scary, and I felt a lot of guilt for a long time. And then also, obviously, it talked about what mainly what gay men do, and it was described in a way to be intentionally gross and very exaggerated from what I understand. But that's the information I got. Or like my dad received the American Family Association journal. That was Donald Wildman's bit. That was an '80s kind of precursor to focus on the family and that kind of thing. And so, sorry, what was I saying? Oh man.
I'm talking
Um,
about internalizing the
yeah,
anti-gay rhetoric.
yeah. So this newsletter that my dad got uh, basically consisted entirely of them either analyzing quote dirty rock music lyrics or talking about how awful gay people are. And so I did learn some more stuff about gay sex, but unfortunately I learned about it in a terrible context. I also learned about a bunch of music by Prince that I definitely wanted to listen to. I think there was an issue and they focused on maybe like one of his whole albums or something. And I was like, oh, got to get a hold of that. And so, so pretty much, and then obviously in the South in the 1980s in a Baptist church, like anything that was said about anything gay related was negative. And then in the media, the only thing that you saw about gay people was gay men suffering from AIDS. And so, and so this is the context that I had. And so when I had feelings, I was about 14 or so when I started having feelings for my friend Terry, who was one of the new people that came to town and that I friended. And I kind of had a crush on her, although I didn't recognize it as that at the time because, um, you know, gayness was portrayed as something evil, and I didn't feel evil. And I just kind of thought, well, that's what everybody feels for, really good friends. And so, like they become obsessed with that person and want to spend every minute with that person. And like I felt inclined to like snuggle with her when like she stayed over at our house, but obviously there was something in me that said, no, we can't do that. And so I didn't, obviously. Um, the amount of dating I did was pretty negligible, but it was with boys. And I had one boyfriend for like 4 months. He turned out to be gay. Uh, later, I found out, and so that was actually a couple of the boys that I went out with kind of had either were gay or had a history of having girlfriends who turned out to be lesbians. And so um
Perhaps.
yeah, I think there was a trend there. And um so yeah, I mean, I just I did my best to fit in, but I just didn't for a number of reasons. And being the preacher's daughter and being on the autism spectrum and being um, also pre-gay. Um, when I was a teenager, I just I, there was not a chance I was going to fit in
Do you
or like be
remember?
popular.
Mm, do you remember when you just like said it to yourself or even out loud the first time? I am gay.
That is an interesting question because like I had a roommate my junior year in college. It was the German house, and so I had this roommate, and so I didn't know her very well, but I did know that she had identified as a lesbian, and so I was just kind of like, I don't know. And then oh, P.S. I'm also drinking the whole time I'm in college. Let's just say that too. That was my attempt to fit in college, which apparently worked, but yeah, I had to deal with that later. But yeah, so one night like we drank some and we were going to talk about like who had the fridge and who had the computer and who had this and who had that for the room the following year. And like a few weeks before that, I had hooked up with a guy and it had been something beyond kissing for the first time. And I remember just like walking home and feeling like yuck. And it wasn't like religious yuck because I was over that at that point. It was like some other kind of yuck. And that that feeling, like the walk of shame, if you will, that feeling that I had on the walk of shame, I was like, oh no, I think I might be gay. Because it wasn't just like I was grossed out. It was like, I mean, this sounds disgusting, but it was like fooling around with a brother. And I just had this feeling of yick. And so I don't have any brothers, but what I imagined that would feel like, and it just wasn't right. Like it was off, it was wrong. And so but again, that wasn't a religious feeling.
Mm,
It wasn't guilt in that sense. It was just like this doesn't work for me. And so I thought maybe it was just that guy. And so, but that was the first time I thought, I think I might be gay or bi or something. And so when I met with this future roommate, and I knew she was identifying as lesbian at the time, I said, I broached the subject and I was like, I think I might be too. Like, how do you know and stuff? And so she told me, but I don't remember any of it because I was pretty drunk. But when we were roommates the next year, she left like literature around, like from whatever, I think P Flag already existed at the time. And so like that kind of literature around, which I read. Um, and so, I was aware that there was something going on, but I wasn't really ready to deal with it. And so like that summer I went out with this guy who, again, like he was just like an electrician and he was all hairy and like nothing that appealed to me in any way. And so I always like ducked out of having to like kiss or fool around. And so, you know I just kind of put off dealing with it, although I was starting to develop crushes like that I acknowledged, at least after the fact, on women. But it built like after college, a couple of years after that, it kept building and building until I would know that I had a crush on a woman while it was happening. And but I didn't make any declarations at that point. I was I was a TA and a student at this summer program for German through the university. It was an immersion program through the University of New Mexico, and so I met a woman there who was a student, although not my student, but she was an undergrad, and so she was like 2 years older than me actually. So she was a non-traditionally aged undergrad, and so we ended up making out, and it was like a revelation. Basically, I was just like, oh, this is what people write all those songs about and books about and love poems about, and I can see why all the girls in high school were so giddy about stuff. Uh, and
because
so
it actually
um,
felt right for the first time.
yeah, yeah. If I mean, what I felt like was right in the sense that, I felt something, and so and like I got it. Like I was like, oh, this is what people are so excited about. Okay, well, I get this. Um, but then, I freaked out the next day. Of course, I was intoxicated when we made out, and then I freaked out the next day and like hid in the library for a while for several days. And then and so obviously nothing, really happened with that. And then but when I got home, I started talking to a few friends, and they're like, "Well, you're just gonna have to sort it out." And so then I made friends with these two women in the French program, and I didn't actually think anything about them being queer or anything. But then they invited me to go see Alien Resurrection, the fourth Alien movie with Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder and Ron Perlman in it, and so it was 1997, and so we went to the movie theater, but before, like when we were on our way to get something to eat first, they said something and my ears were kind of like, what? And then one said to the other, oh, should we tell her? And I was like, tell me what? And they're like, well, we're gay. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, and then I started asking them all these questions like, well, do you feel cut off from the rest of the world? Do you feel like, how have you kind of reconciled that religiously? All kinds of stuff like that. But I still didn't make any declarations. Um, and so we went to the movie and they were holding hands with each other. And so I was just like very aware of the fact that that was happening. And so, after the movie, they're like, yeah, we're together. And I was like, okay, cool. That's great. And then, so the one gal went to bed and the other one stayed up with me because we were going to watch this a video I had of like a bunch of different music videos by 10,000 Maniacs and Natalie Merchant, who I was obsessed with at the time. And that wasn't gay at all. Uh, and so then, and so she happened to be a fan too. And so I had brought the tape over for us to watch. And before we started watching, she was just like, I had mentioned being obsessed with Natalie Merchant and stuff. And she had said that she and this other girl were together. And so she's like, so are you seeing anybody? And I was like, no, but the most recent involvement I had was with a woman. And it was the lady I met at the immersion program. Um, and so I don't know exactly what she said or what, but like at some point during this conversation, it was just like neon lights over my head, like, holy shit, I'm gay. Like, these girls I know seem normal and cool and like people I can relate to, and they're gay, and so like, they seem fine. So I think I'll be fine.
How much time passed between this revelation and actually coming out to your parents? And how was
That,
that?
that was about 6 months,
Oh, wow.
and
Only.
yeah. So when I had this realization, I went home that night and I thought about it a lot. I had a journal that I was keeping at the time. And so I was writing and, I was thinking about it and what praying I still did at the time. I did that. And I was up all night and, crying and all this stuff. And, but I guess I fell asleep at some point because I woke up the next morning and I was like, okay, I can do this. And that's when I started writing friends and coming out to them and them being like, yeah, we were taking bets. I had longer hair at the time, but I was still like this person. And so I guess they weren't super surprised. And so then, I set about like, well, in the midst of being in the middle of trying to get a master's degree, I'm also going to have to like deal with this with my parents because, I'm not going to be able to be around them if I don't. Just for me personally, like I can't like not be honest. And so, and I'm not going to censor myself around people. That's stupid. And so, I mean, it's not stupid. It's just like doesn't seem right. And so, I was like, well, I'm going to have to tell my parents. And so I went to the free therapy that was available on campus. And the lady there who I talked to, I was kind of in the process of coming out already when we started talking. And so then, like, while we were talking, and I think she was like, did I help you do this? And I was like, kind of, I don't know. But anyway, she was a student in psychology, I guess, studying to be a therapist or whatever. And so, but then, we turn towards, well, I'm gonna have to tell my parents this, and they are these Bible believing Baptists who, are potentially going to react negatively. But at the same time, like, my dad, besides preaching, he ended up going and getting a master's in English, and then he was a TA in English at the local college. And so, and his boss was a lesbian, and like, he was real just like, yeah, she is. And he seemed to think it was okay because it meant that, like, there was not going to be people thinking they were like a thing or anything. Which he's real conscious of that for some reason, like thinking like people are gonna think he's hooking up with some ladies when he's not. I don't know. I think he said something about avoiding the appearance of evil. P.S. I think my dad's totally on the spectrum too, but we'll never know. But I think he might be. And so then, and so the therapist, one of the things that she told me was, I love my dad, but he's wrong. I love my dad, but he's wrong. Like, she told me when I went home to like say that mantra. And so, my mom was, I mean, basically her response was, so are you going to dress like a man now? And like, I was wearing army pants and like a tank top at the time. And I think I had a phase of wearing boxers as underwear for a while. And so I was like, not any more than I am now. Like, I mean, I guess, I don't know. How do I normally dress? I mean, it was still kind of like the tail end of the grunge era. And like, everybody wore jeans and hoodies and flannels and t-shirts and Converse anyway. And so, a classic look still looks great, still my wardrobe. But yeah, so I don't know. That was my mom's reaction, and then my dad, of course, reacted completely negatively. Um, and luckily, I was more or less financially independent at this point. Like, if I had to be financially independent, I could have been at that point. It was painful. It was very painful because he was saying all this stuff to me. Not just about homosexuals in general, but to me. And so I had gotten him this book called Stranger at the Gate, by a former Baptist pastor who came out as gay. And then I had bought this other book called, What the Bible Really Says About Homosexuality, like from an Episcopal bishop, which he had respect for the Episcopal Church and for Methodists and stuff. So I feel like, I felt like maybe he would read that at least. And then this book by a former pastor, like, that guy's going to be legit. But, I came back like 2 years later and the books were still in the same drawer that they had gotten shoved into. And so, like, I don't know if he ever read it or not, probably not. But from then on, like, it was just two steps forward, one step back with my parents. Um, like, a couple of years later, there were a couple of Christmases where I had a girlfriend, and her family was in Florida, and she couldn't. We were in Indiana at the time, and so she had family in Florida, but didn't have the money to make it down there. And so I was like, well, maybe you can come home with me. And of course, my parents were just like, no. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to leave her here by herself for Christmas. And so we just kind of took our own trip somewhere else in my car, and just kind of spent that time together. And then, the same thing happened the next year. And that, like, the Christmas thing really hurt. Like, I'm still upset about that, to be honest. Like, that was wrong of them. And so, I there was that. And so, like, for a long time, I didn't talk to my parents. But honestly, like, the only homophobia I've ever experienced, like, blatantly, other than just random street harassment, has been from my family.
Mm.
No, nobody I knew from college, nobody I knew from high school, nobody. Because, like, half the time those people would be like, oh yeah, my cousin's gay or my sister's gay or whatever. And so, like, nobody my age had any kind of problem with it. And so the fact that my parents did, and my family did, made it extra hurtful, because you would think family would be at least trying to be supportive.
How did
And
it
so, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. How did it feel? Like you'd said that when you came out to him, he basically screamed at you for 2 hours straight.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say scream, but yelled. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he
So
got
you
loud
just like
and
closing in yourself, just like bearing the brunt of the attack and just waiting for it to be over, kind of.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I obviously argued with him because that's what I do. But when I was a little kid, he said one time, "You could argue the horns off a brass monkey," and I have no idea what that means. But I guess brass monkeys have horns. I don't know. There's a Beastie Boys song called "Brass Monkey" that's pretty good. Anyway, so I'm one to tend to like if I actually can't help it. Like if somebody says something that's just factually wrong, I'm just like, excuse me, wait a minute, that is not correct. And so, and that's only gotten worse since I've become a professor. But I would argue with him some, but ultimately, like, he wasn't going to be reasoned with. I mean, that is true of, evangelical and fundamentalist folks generally, is that like you can't argue them out of their position no matter how logical you are. And so after a couple of hours I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to go back home. I lived about 5 hours away across the state, 5 or 6 hours. And so I was just like, all right, well, I'm going home now, bye. And I was crying, I was sad, and I was just, I was like you say, like I was kind of just like, ugh, but I mean, I just went back, and a few weeks later, my dad didn't talk to me for several weeks. A few weeks later, he called and was trying to convince me to not be gay. And so I was just like, you know, I think I mentioned that Star Trek episode where Spock argues the computer into imploding upon itself. He outlogics the computer. And this is kind of what happened here, And essentially what I said was, well, you raised me not to be a liar, and I'm not going to be a liar. So too bad. And his head basically exploded, and he was just kind of sputtered at that and didn't know what to say. And I was like, all right, bye. My mom got better because she found out that her favorite brother is gay. And so that was something new for her, but like that was her baby brother, and then she had me. And so she got real cool about gay people all of a sudden. And I mean, not like marching in pride or anything, but like being sympathetic, if nothing else, and maybe even a little bit okay with it. So she got pretty okay with it. And like every once in a while, like she would, like when I was with my ex, who I was with for 8 years, um she would comment every now and then, like, I'm really proud of you girls for not needing a man. And like, so she related on that level, I guess. Because I don't know, I guess like married couples of their generation are like really codependent with one another or something. It's kind of weird to me, like they're not individual people. But or yeah, I don't know, or at least my parents aren't. But yeah, but my dad would kind of sort of be okay and then not okay. And then sometimes he would refer to me being gay as like my rebellion. And I'm like, I'm not 12, like I'm not 14, like teenagers rebel, you know and but even teenagers don't usually rebel in this way. And so I was just like, it's not rebellion, stop calling it that. Then fast forward to, like, I guess it was 2016 or so. I'm with my wife, who I'm married to now. And we were gonna get married. It became legal in 2015, and then we were gonna, and of course, the second it was announced, my wife was like, "Nope, we're waiting 6 months to a year." And so I proposed to her exactly 6 months later, um, and so, and then we got married like 6 months after that, approximately. And so I want to say ungefähr German, but yeah, approximately. And so yeah, so the shooting in Miami happened. The mass murder of a bunch of people in a gay club in Miami. I think it was like 52 people or something. And somehow that like affected my dad in some way. And he called me that day. It was a Sunday. I remember it really well. And he was kind of like it's like we kind of had a breakthrough, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna come to your wedding, all this stuff, because I had been wondering if he was going to. I mean, obviously we sent them an invitation, and so he said he would come to the wedding, and then you know, and so I was super excited about that. And so I put on Facebook, yay, my dad's gonna come to the wedding, whatever. Um, my mom is on Facebook, or was, not anymore after that, but and so somehow she was connected to me, and then she was also connected to members of the church that he was the pastor of at the time. And somehow somebody saw something, and I guess somehow, like, he had passed it off all those years as I was married to my job or something, even though, like, I had been in two long-term relationships at that point. And so somebody got wind of it, and then it spread around the church that he was going to perform the wedding, which, gross. I'm not going to have I mean, what is a Baptist gay wedding? That doesn't even exist. Like WTF? And so I was, and your dad performing your wedding, gross. Like, I wasn't even gonna have him walk me down the aisle. Like, that's gross. And so, like, giving, like, I wasn't his to give away. But yeah, but he was gonna attend, which is what I wanted, and which is what normal parents do, as far as I know. And so but like, it started spreading around the church that he was going to perform the wedding. And then, there was talk of, well, obviously, if, like, he can't even control his own child, which I was 43 at the time, and, like, I hadn't been controllable since I was like 15. So I mean, not that I did anything wild when I was in my teens, but, like, I wasn't going to do stuff I didn't want to do. He was afraid they were going to vote him out, and so, uh, for the case of plausible deniability, he chose not to come to my wedding, which I found out through my mom when I was getting ready for my wedding. And so, and it was just like, this was going to be his chance to see that I have people in my life that, I'm a colleague and a friend and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, this still affects me kind of. It's 2016 is not that long ago.
No.
But yeah. Anyway, so and so he wanted to be able to say that he wasn't there for the church. But of course, they didn't care at that point. Like, they were already like, well, he has a gay child, so obviously there's something wrong with him. And so they were gonna vote him out, so he just retired. Which he needed to do a long time ago anyway. This church was full of apparently real jerks, like all the other ones. And so anyway, he retired very soon after that. But the fact is, like, I have wedding pictures that my dad will never be in, you know, and he never really apologized. He's one of those people who throws money at problems, and so he offered to buy me a car, which is weird. I mean, like I said, I'm a middle-aged adult. Like, I can buy my own car. I mean, I had a car that worked just fine at the time, but I was like, well, I'm not going to say no to a new car. Like, who does that? And so I was like, fine. But he thinks that got him off the hook from me, but it did not. And like, I was really angry when I got that information from my mom on my wedding day. And so, like, I kind of lashed out, which is not something that I do a lot. Like, I don't push people's buttons. Like, that's just a no-no to me. uh but I chose to push his button that day. And so I just said, you can tell him, since he's not coming to my wedding, I won't be at his funeral. That's not really true, but I was very angry at the time, and so, I was liable to say anything, I guess, because it really, really hurt. And so, I'm still not over it. Like, you can see me getting, like, a little bit emotional right now. And it's just unfortunate that he chose not to be a part of that important day, because it was great. Like, it was a great party. Like, we had catering. We had, like, our officiant was not Baptist. He was Buddhist. And and we had friends do readings, and her family was there. My mom came, and then, like, a lot of people I work with. And so, like, it was really cool. It was a great time. Um, but unfortunately, I'll never have him in those photos. I won't have the memory of him being there. And like a few days after my wedding, or maybe like, I don't know, less than a month, like he performed a wedding and sent me a picture from it. And I'm like, listen, you cannot send me a picture of you performing a wedding or being at a wedding or any married couple and not expect me to just be like livid at you. Like I was just like, don't ever send me this stuff again. And
Read the
so
room, Dad.
he can't read the room. Like I said, I'm pretty certain he's like on the spectrum.
Mm.
And I think his dad may have been too, although I don't have a lot of real evidence for that, just stories he's told, but it kind of sounds like it. But yeah, and so, he has a hard time. It's weird that he's in such or was in such a people person position because like he doesn't actually connect with people that quickly or closely.
Mm.
And so yeah, but I won't have that. Like I won't have that memory. And he cannot read the room, and so that was super hurtful to send those pictures, and I still don't know why he did it. I think just he was just like, "Oh, this is a nice picture of me." um and so anyway, since then, since he's not been preaching anymore and since he doesn't have a church that he's beholden to, he's gotten a little bit more, I kind of want to say, lax about religious stuff. Like, um, eh, he joked about how he and mom had started attending Broyhill Baptist, and I was like, "Where's that? I never heard of that church." And he's like, "It's this couch right here. It's a Broyhill." Um, he can be funny sometimes, um, but I mean, total dad joke style.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and so he has grown a little bit since then, but and like he's aware that my wife is here to stay, like we're not going anywhere. And so we have come to see them on Christmas on occasion. They have come to see us on occasion.
Mm.
They give her presents just like they do me. And and I think my mom genuinely loves my wife. Uh, in so much as my dad can love anyone, he probably does. I don't know. We're a weird family, okay? So my parents live in the country, and so they have a bunch of raccoons and deers and foxes and different creatures that live on their property, and they feed them sandwiches. And so my dad goes to the day old bread store and buys a bunch of semi-stale bread, and they get a giant vat of peanut butter from the discount place, and then they make these sandwiches for all the creatures. And so when Christmas is no exception. And so a couple of years ago when we went there for Christmas, my wife helped with the sandwich making, and she had kind of a system going, and he's like, "Oh, you have a good system there. I think I'm going to do that." And for some reason, now he super likes her because she had a good system. Uh, and so, I mean, to be fair, it was a very good system. And no, I think again, I think it's a spectrum thing because everything is like patterns and systems and
Mm.
structures and all that stuff. So like I get it, but but I just thought that was funny that like that's the detail that won
Oh,
him over for whatever reason.
that's so.
And I think he's aware enough to know that she's like really sweet and a good person and all that. And so yeah, I wouldn't say that like we're super super close, but I don't know that we were ever gonna be.
But when you go back to how it was those years before, when it seemed like you would never have any kind of relationship again, it's something that story is something that could give hope to somebody out there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the thing is, like kind of whatever point we've been at, I've always just been like, okay, well, this is how it is. This is good as it gets. And so then if it got any better, I was like, oh, great. Um,
My dad
but
always says, aim low. That way you'll never be disappointed.
well, I didn't really aim at all. I was just like, well, hopefully he figures stuff out. Meanwhile, I'm just gonna live my life. I mean, and I love my parents, in the sense that, I want them to be healthy and feel good and be happy and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And when we see each other, I'm always happy to see them. Um, particularly my mom, but also my dad. But I also get nervous every time I go there, and especially I have a meltdown every holiday. And I've had one ever since. Like Tracy, my wife, every year, she's like, "Well, you haven't had your holiday meltdown yet," and then 2 days later, I'll freak out. Uh, oh, have we got time? Is
No,
are we
no, I was
okay?
miming like time for my breakdown.
Yeah, yeah, right. No, I mean seriously, it's happened, and like this year's wasn't too bad, but they've been pretty. They can last a couple days sometimes.
Mm.
And it's I get real shaky and like can't concentrate and that kind of thing. It hasn't been easy, and it's been very frustrating and very painful, and I have shed a lot of tears and lost a lot of sleep over it. I will say that.
Oh yeah. And to segue into our last question here, what would you say to the closeted, scared, hurting gay kids out there, or adults,
Yeah,
that,
anybody.
that young version of yourself that just got yelled at for a few hours for being honest about who you were?
I mean, I guess my message to folks out there who are dealing with the same kind of thing, and you have religious family members and you don't really know what to do, either whether to come out to them or whether, what to do if you have and their reaction is negative. But the one thing that I can say is that don't back down. Don't let them tell you who you are. You know who you are. And, just don't let people bully you or, certainly not family. I mean, people are going to bully people, but like, certainly don't let your family uh, get in the way of your life. You deserve to live the life you're meant to live, whatever that is. And, if family can't get on board with that, I mean, frankly, screw them because they don't have to live your life every day. You do. And, you should live it however you want and however feels right to you. And don't feel guilty about it. Their reactions are theirs, not yours. You own your own life, they own theirs. And it's always important to keep that in mind.
Well said. Yes.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time to share your story. And I'm just speaking as well to the people watching this. If you feel any of the story or you think of the person in your life that you know who's gay and who struggled with it, just go and give them a hug, send them a message, let them know that you care, and just spread some of this love. And here, this is how I end my conversations. I give hugs. So I'm hugging you, Elizabeth. I'm hugging you, person watching this. Thank you for
Me
being
too.
here. This channel is about community, about getting out of toxic thinking, about accepting yourself and loving yourself. And if that sounds good to you, then you should subscribe and come and hang out, because I talk to a lot of awesome people and we'd love to build a community here. This community here is for the best people in the world. So yeah, pretty exclusive group. And bye.
Bye. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I've had so many wonderful conversations with people from all different walks of life, so I really hope you will subscribe and stick around and join the community. On this channel, I also do vlogs. I'd love for you to just take a chance on those and see if you connect with them. Thank you so much for being here. Hugs!